Our story calls upon the richest man on the planet and the poorest people of all. We will cross oceans, we will track down tiny bugs under a microscope. The stakes? Millions of human lives to be saved. In this story, a child will die, but others, many others, will be saved. The African storyteller told me, the sun does not forget a face because it is small. Words can cast a veil over the realities they convey. We say, neglected tropical diseases. We don't say that without treatment, these diseases are deadly. Malaria, tuberculosis, sleeping sickness, Chagas disease, visceral leishmaniasis. We call them neglected tropical diseases. They affect 1 in every 6 inhabitants on Earth. That's 1 billion people. So who is more neglected, the people or the disease?
Les années 1924, 1925 et 1926 marque dans l'histoire du Cameroun, sur le plan médical, une période dramatique. Sur 100 décès constatés dans les régions du centre Cameroun, 45 sont dus à la maladie du sommeil. Porteurs et pagayeurs, en traversant ou en séjournant dans les villages, disséminent la maladie par l'intermédiaire de la mouche tsetse. Au stade terminal, la trypanosomiase est caractéristique. Le sommeilleux n'est plus qu'un grabataire.
Human African trypanosomiasis, or sleeping sickness. It evokes a very big sleep indeed. The parasite is carried by the tsetse fly. It does such damage to the brain. Patients have been known to chase after their relatives with a machete, plunge headfirst into latrines, or howl with pain when a drop of water brushes their skin. They are seen to be mad or possessed. They are left aside. The big sleep occurs in the final stage, with great lethargy, then a coma, then death. In 1930, white men screened images of sleeping sickness on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. Almost a century later, the images are in color, the colonizers have gone home, and Africa has vanished from the Champs-Élysées screens. For this neglected disease and those who suffer from it, almost nothing has changed. Nearly a century later, there is still no effective treatment and still the same painful diagnosis. The most widespread treatment for sleeping sickness is as old as the hills. It is based on arsenic. Arsenic is like fire in the veins. It kills 1 in every 20 patients when the doctor injects it. But when you're drowning, you latch onto anything, even a snake. The other treatment for sleeping sickness requires 14 days of IV drips. How to go about transporting a cubic meter per patient in a country that has no roads? What to do in places that have no hospital?
Et donc vous donnez en 3 fois par jour?
Non, 4 fois par jour.
Ah, 4 fois par jour. Ah.
C'est-à-dire, si nous avons, au moment où nous avons beaucoup de malades, par exemple, le mois passé, nous avons
14 malades qui étaient sous traitement. Avec le programme Adipumba et Katanda, on a fait une étude pour tester si on peut faire le DFMO au lieu de 4 fois par jour pendant 14 jours. On a administré 2 fois par jour pendant 7 jours. Et on a en association donné des comprimés de Lampitz, d'un autre médicament, et on a démontré que ça marche bien aussi. Est-ce que ça vous intéresse d'utiliser ça?
Allège un peu la tâche.
Et ça vous paraît intéressant d'avoir quelque chose qui est plus pratique?
You cannot pick up a stone with one finger. Els Dorel is a project manager for DNDi, an NGO that is fighting to bring new treatments to people who have been neglected by research. To demonstrate the effectiveness of a new combination of drugs, DNDi worked with Médecins Sans Frontières, the Swiss Tropical Institute, and the Congolese people. They had to follow 120 patients over several years and convince people who thought they were cured to go back to hospital every 6 months in order to have a lumbar puncture. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the healthcare teams went looking for patients who move around the forest without leaving an address. People said, there's no way a scientific study can be conducted in a country like the Congo. They said it wouldn't work.
Il y a par exemple un malade qui demeure introuvable. J'ai fait au moins 400 km pour aller le chercher là-haut. Oui, en moto.
Je suis allé même dans des églises. Et on m'a dit qu'elle est dans un village à 24 km de Lusambo. Donc c'était dans la forêt. Et il n'y a pas de route, pas moyen d'aller même avec moto ou bien vélo. J'ai fait les pieds. J'ai fait la ponction, j'ai prélevé le sang. Je suis rentré vite pour venir examiner. 5 heures de marche.
C'est des petites histoires qui montrent comment chaque cas est individuel, mais quand il y a des gens comme vous qui vraiment s'y prennent, voilà, et on réussit. Et bon, c'est ce qui était l'essentiel pour l'étude. On faisait cette étude pour montrer que le traitement était efficace, et c'était la seule manière de le prouver. Donc, ouais, chapeau, c'est impressionnant.
DNDi's study was crowned with success. Soon, patients in the Congo and all over the world will benefit from a better treatment that will be distributed by the World Health Organization on a wide scale. They said it wouldn't work, but it did. DNDi, Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative, is a story of revolt and challenge. A revolt on the part of MSF, who spent years denouncing the lack of drugs to treat lethal diseases. A challenge to research and manufacture for the poorest people in the world drugs against diseases neglected by the pharmaceutical industry.
I understood that you said I don't want us to talk about anything else.
The Pretoria drugs trial was a decisive moment in this fight. In 2001, the biggest pharmaceutical laboratories in the world attacked Mandela's South Africa in the Nations Court. Their aim was to force the government to stop using generic medicines to treat AIDS. On the one hand were billions of profits, on the other, millions of lives. It was the trial of corporate shareholder interests versus the interests of patients. It was the trial of shame. The world cried out its indignation, and MSF was part of the fight. Having buckled under the pressure, the laboratories withdrew their case. The balance of power was reversed. At the same time, MSF was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The money from the Nobel was invested in a think tank that in 2003 gave rise to DNDi.
C'était tout un symbole. On partait du prix Nobel de la paix, mais en fait, on en arrivait aux victimes, aux gens qui, au bout de la chaîne, dans les zones les plus reculées de la République démocratique du Congo, en fait, meurent de maladie du sommeil, tout simplement parce que pendant un siècle, on a oublié de rechercher des médicaments qui pouvaient les sauver. Donc c'était là où on est arrivé à faire le lien, faire parler de ce sujet et commencer à chercher des solutions originales.
For each grain of rice that is sown, 100 would be harvested. But you may have to wait a long time. A new medicine requires a good 10 years of research. Meanwhile, tropical diseases keep on killing. Malaria, sleeping sickness, Kala-Azar. How many millions of people are still dying of tropical diseases every year? We don't know. People who don't matter don't get counted. One child, one. Warm water compresses and heartfelt compassions won't change anything. The child will die of malaria during the night of July the 16th. He was 4 years old. His name was Ashish Lakra, which in Sanskrit means blessing. Somewhere in the world, a child dies of malaria every 30 seconds. We can say it, we can shout it even. A child dies of malaria every 30 seconds. It doesn't change anything. We must act. Yes, act. The pill is yellow and white, like the two sides of the sun and the moon finally united. AZAC was conceived by DNDi in partnership with Sanofi Aventis. On the one hand, an NGO, on the other, the fourth largest pharmaceutical corporation in the world. To fight malaria, it's the best of science in its simplest form. One pill a day for 3 days, and it saves lives.
Avec les combinaisons thérapeutiques qui contiennent l'artésunate aujourd'hui, on a une efficacité redoutable et qui doit réellement, si c'est utilisé massivement, changer la dynamique de cette maladie en Afrique.
On a été plus loin qu'un partenariat classique. Le premier chose, c'est-à-dire on va développer ensemble, c'est le médicament que vous voyez ici, la petite pilule là, pour les enfants. Deuxièmement, on a dit on va le sortir à moins d'$1 chez l'adulte, moins de 0,50 chez l'enfant. Et troisièmement, on ne prend pas de brevet sur cette molécule parce qu'il y a un tel besoin qu'il serait ridicule de prendre un brevet.
The same corporations that wanted to limit access to medicines have become partners in the fight against neglected diseases. ARTE can be reproduced and manufactured anywhere in the world. The treatment is sold at cost price, $1 per treatment for an adult, 50 cents for a child. A life for half of almost nothing.
DNDi, c'est un peu la mouche du coche contre l'industrie pharmaceutique, de dire il n'y a pas assez de recherche aux maladies négligées. On a travaillé ensemble. Eux, ils ont vu que dans l'industrie, il n'y avait pas que des mauvais. Nous, on a vu que dans les fondations, il y avait aussi des gens très bien. Et au-delà du développement de ce qu'on a fait en commun, de notre bébé, j'ai envie de dire, le bébé de ce mariage de raison, qui est l'ARTE, au-delà de ça, c'est que c'est deux mondes qui se sont rencontrés, qui ont appris à travailler ensemble. Et puis, on a tellement bien réussi qu'on a envie de travailler ensemble dans d'autres maladies. Et ça, c'est important. Ça, c'est important parce que de toute manière, qu'on le veuille ou pas, tous les savoir-faire sont indispensables si on veut combler le fossé entre le nord et le sud en termes de pathologie, en termes de santé publique. Mais c'est un partenariat obligatoire parce qu'on a un savoir-faire. Mais nous aussi, on a besoin d'ONG, on a besoin de politique, on a besoin d'organisations internationales.
However high a bird may fly, it always comes back to land in the end. 80% of the world's population still has no access to medicines, but something that once seemed inaccessible should no longer be so. Soon we hope to find ARTE all over Africa, even off the remotest tracks.
15 patients, donc 10 patients c'est paludisme, donc c'est pratiquement 75%. Donc c'est vraiment la première cause de morbidité. C'est notre hantise. On a développé la nouvelle combinaison fixe. Oui. Que je pense que vous allez recevoir dans un prochain temps. Donc au lieu de 24 comprimés pour l'adulte, vous n'en aurez plus que 6. Donc 2 par jour. Oui. Et pour les enfants, vous en aurez 1 par jour pendant 3 jours. Et comprimés solubles pour les enfants de moins de 5 ans. Et donc dès qu'on aura passé des accords avec les autorités publiques, je pense que très vite vous aurez toutes ces choses-là.
Ça serait une très bonne chose.
En tout cas, merci beaucoup de nous avoir reçus.
Non, il n'y a pas de
Surtout
quoi.
C'était l'heure de la prière.
De la prière, c'est pourquoi bon, les agents sont tous éparpillés. Ouais. Tout le monde est presque rentré.
On a en plus développé, on a fait évoluer le produit. Donc vous avez ici l'adulte, vous avez ici le grand enfant, le petit enfant et le nourrisson. On a livré en quelques mois, même pas un mois et demi, 2 millions de traitements pratiquement vont être livrés au Congo. On a livré déjà 800 000 traitements en quelques jours. Hein, on avait des stocks, et eux, ils avaient un besoin, ils n'avaient rien. Eux, ils n'avaient rien.
René Castien is the sales manager for the new access to medicines arm of Sanofi Aventis. He puts his all into selling ARTE for $1 to fight the malaria-killing children in Burkina Faso. The state employees he meets are anxious to improve the situation. International funds have been released. The money is there, as is the political resolve. Hundreds of millions of treatments are waiting to be flown to Burkina Faso. To launch the order, just one last signature is needed. The World Bank representative has gone home on her summer break, a long way from Burkina Faso. The rainy season has come, and with it, malaria. They don't take a break.
Salam alaikum. Umu! Pas follow my mouth, la.
What use would international aid be? The genius of researchers, the mobilization of politicians and healthcare professionals, without these anonymous helpers traveling from hut to hut down distant tracks, never flagging in their fight to prevent malaria. In Burkina Faso, in the Tengai district, the anonymous helper's name is Asiata.
Nasani wala basi do sifu zao ba ya so ya. Sifu de la wana tutu.
Ah. Tondel mo sa ton se sifu fama. Ela kumbel. On patala team la. Sempre ken lo to ri. Ton patala team ni.
La mi lo pamit lo to ide se ken of pa mati. Ha?
Paligi de me ninga lam msen ne lo to pa comme ça ken nyata songole. Msen ne lo to pa quoi. Ça ken nyata songole. Lam panan ken ni.
Ayo me tale henti ko panan ken. Ha? Ya me tale henti ko panan ken.
Batala henti ko ani wende balam tiki yo. La wende la yamba.
Wende la yamba to se. Tum de lo to mo.
Yai.
La wala to lo to ma tama pali lo to yi de mano ana. Ba te gan furo. Furo to ba. Furo ga. La mano ana pa furo ka we mano ana. Mami papa ni. O ba furo. Ayo.
Amigo si papa furo dan do.
Ha?
Ke
pa furo
ye. Ke da pona papa furo.
Ala fo si de papa furo.
Ayo ne pa.
O to ya ko.
Ti ya ka de sin ko so ya. Di pa mi wa ibu le kai de ton ya ka. Sa mi ta ya. Ne ba ba yo ba ton de ya ke. Ai la ko la ba to. Ya ko ba sa ko e. Ya so ban ban sa ka.
La bo yin la ba patal furo.
Ba le kai. Sen ta le to me. Dani ngam bi bun ko he den da. Ku sen ta ni bi kun dani. Ba ta la yo ko ho. La ba sen ba ta le to. Le me e so ko la fe. Ne ki bi mi da.
Amina. Ari la to se yo ke o ko ya. Za o yo ka ta ne ba. Yo ka ta ne ba wana ka. Wait for it to happen ko ya.
Nothing is simple in the fight against malaria. Once you have a mosquito net at home, all you need is 4 nails. But even if you have those nails, you may not have the walls to fix them to. Thanks to the Burkina Faso anti-malaria program, mosquito nets are given to pregnant women. To others, they are sold at a subsidized price of 500 CFA francs, the equivalent of 50 Indian rupees or $1 US. In the months following René Castien's visit to Burkina Faso, the country's central buying office placed an order for 2,900,000 ASAC treatments for children under the age of 5. How many lives saved? To counter malaria, talismans, bogus medicines and obsolete treatments have swamped the market. The parasite is boosting its resistance, and the fight against malaria is getting harder. A drug that is effective in Africa may not be in Asia. To demonstrate ASAC's effectiveness in India, DNDi's partner conducted a study of 155 malaria patients. At the gateway to Nepal and Bangladesh, in the Jharkhand region, infested with mosquitoes and armed gangs, they went where cars don't go.
यहाँ मेन बीमारी हम लोग मलेरिया डिपार्टमेंट के हैं ना, इसमें मलेरिया देंगे जो आँख वाला आएगा तो आँख देगा, तो हमारी लिमिटेशन.
Morkay Devi was the first person to dare to take part in the DNDi study. After she was cured, she could then convince her neighbors, like Ajay Gatwa, age 6. His name means the invincible. He too had malaria. Thanks to ASAC, the invincible was not struck down.
क्या इसमें शिकायत है क्या बाहर जाएगा लंदन में जाएगा फोटो पूरा दुनिया में चलेगा नहीं
ASAC was demonstrated to be effective in India. DNDi's reports will soon be submitted to the Drug Controller General in Delhi. Over 10 million treatments are at stake.
You try it? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, one word on
ASAC in India.
ASAC in India. Well, two issues that we have discussed before. One is the fact that the import duty is 30%, so very, very high. And the second one is that these are government-controlled prices, so very, very low. And so the two things combined, it's just not viable for Sanofi. So we can go to the next step and see whether we work with someone else to implement that.
Seattle, 10 years ago, tens of thousands of people demonstrated against the World Trade regulations. At the time, patients from the South did not have access to the medicines from the North. Bernard was there. 10 years later, Bernard is in charge of DNDi and works with the Gates Foundation. Every year, Bill and Melinda Gates spend billions of dollars, their billions of dollars, on health, education, and the fight against poverty. The budget they give to neglected diseases and AIDS is bigger than the World Health Organization's. The credo of the Gates Foundation is, all lives have equal value.
How are you? How do you do? Yeah, it's nice to see you. How are you doing? Bernard Picot. Yeah, nice to meet you.
In Seattle, DNDi and the Gates Foundation organized an international meeting on the most neglected diseases. Who would have once bet $1 or even a rupee on the idea that you could beat these diseases?
We should declare the goal of eradicating malaria because with enough time, we can eradicate malaria. Today, I want to make the case that we have a real chance to build the partnerships, to generate the political will, and to develop the scientific breakthroughs that, given time, will end this disease. The biggest players today were not in the game 5 years ago. The infusion of new money is allowing countries with high rates of malaria to look for the first time at comprehensive national programs where they can coordinate a wide variety of tools for maximum effect. No single approach will work alone, but several partially effective approaches can have a huge impact.
Asikia mkuu uvunjika guu. Sasa wananchi tumepiga mgambo, tufunge mikanda, tumshinde adui malaria na tumchape kwa dawa ya alu. Selema! Alu waye! Alu waye!
How to sell good medicines to people who live on $1 a day. Initiatives are being launched around the world. The Novartis laboratory is selling Tanzania its Alu anti-malaria treatments at cost. But the Tanzania's entire health budget is not enough to tackle the 18 million cases of malaria declared there every year. In 2 pilot regions, the Gates Foundation and the Clinton Foundation subsidize the treatment to bring its cost down to the price of ASAC. $1 per treatment for adults and half that amount for children. The African storyteller knows this tale. At the end of the day, even the man who sells the sun has to cut his prices.
Pandambili oye! Pandambili safi!
2 years ago, Lorraine took a break from her degree at Harvard. She works for the Clinton Foundation, bringing Alu anti-malaria pills to villages in Tanzania that have never had a pharmacy.
Habari dada.
Happy used to be a seamstress, but she recently took some training and swapped her needles to sell these new subsidized treatments. Happy's stall is open from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., 7 days a week. Thanks to Lorraine and Happy, thanks to the two Bills, Gates and Clinton, Alu is sold in the most remote villages for 1,200 Tanzanian shillings. That's $1 US. Happy and Lauren, Bill and Bill. One hand cannot upload on its own.
Anajisikiaje?
Malaria tu wanasikia kichwa kinauma.
Ameanza leo?
Leo
Sikia ngapi?
Gani?
Hii shilingi 1,200. Hapa gharama yake. Hii ni nzuri sana.
Sawa.
Lakini sasa unajua kwa sababu tukana na jana tangia jana anajisikia dalili ya homa. Kadri unavyomwacha wala wadudu wanazidi kuzaliana.
Sasa ngoja nikaangalie. Takuja inifuate.
Utakuja baadaye?
So nani?
Au mpe paracetamol kwa sasa hivi, afu jioni uje uchukue dozi.
Nifungie kumi basi.
Mama una malaria? Una malaria?
Una malaria?
Ana dalili za malaria.
Mtoto?
Mtoto. Ana dalili za malaria mwanawe yani. Miaka ngapi? Nasema zaidi ya miaka 18. Kwa hiyo anatumia dozi ya zaidi ya miaka 18. Hasa ndo akawa anasema kwa sasa hivi hana ile pesa. Sina. Kuna pesa.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Hello. Please take your seats, please. I think the mood now is to talk about eradicating malaria. Some people think this is a very ambitious statement. We have so many others now. Clinton is on board, the Gates as well. I attended the Gates meeting in Seattle, and they were powerful speeches. Yeah. Because when you listen to Melinda and Bill talking, you think they're politicians. They're so convincing and they master of language. So malaria remains the #1 killer. We lose up to 100,000 people every year, the majority being children under 5 and pregnant mothers.
During the last malaria season, the hospital ran out of room, and there were 3 children in every bed. This year, there is just 1 child per bed. Eyewitness reports are confirmed by the Clinton Foundation's studies. The experiment of $1 subsidized treatments is a success. They are thinking of extending it throughout Tanzania, and then to Rwanda and Uganda. In Ethiopia, the malaria mortality rate has dropped 60% in less than 2 years.
It's fortunately a local species, and actually they're not very thirsty.
The rainy season is malaria season, but rain is not the problem. It's mosquitoes that carry malaria. For sleeping sickness, the vector is a fly. For Chagas disease, it's a bug. For visceral leishmaniasis, or kala-azar, it's a tiny gnat. It's feeble and barely knows how to fly, but it kills more people than tigers and snakes combined. It seeks refuge in the cow dung that is used to fortify huts and as a fuel for cooking. Kala-azar is the disease of people for whom cow dung is a treasure.
1, 2, there is 2.
They say that little bugs are responsible for the millions of victims of neglected diseases. They're right. Since they bite and sting at night, maybe darkness could be incriminated too. More than any insect, it's poverty that kills. And that's no small bug to contend with.
आपके घर में कितने आदमी को काला जाता?
3 आदमी।
3 आदमी। तो उसमें कितना खर्चा लगा था? टोटल जांच फांच से लेकर के इलाज तक कितना खर्चा लगा था?
तो घर ही हमारा 4-5 हजार लग गया 3 महीना में। 3 महीना बुखार तो लगत रहे 2 महीना से लगत तब न पकड़ायल न विद्युपुर न पटना न हाजीपुर तब मुजफ्फरपुर भगली तब जाके तब उठे बुखार पकड़ायल।
सरकार से कुछ मदद मिला ना?
सरकार से कुछ कहाँ सर बेटा?
कुछ
नहीं बेटा।
अच्छा, अपना पैसा खर्चा कर।
इस तरह कईयों पेशेंट यहाँ से मर भी गया, काला मरा भी है, 5-6 मर गया।
5-6 मरा भी।
एगो लड़का पड़ल।
अच्छा, उसके बाद फिर काला जार हो गया।
उसके बाद फिर कहता है दर्द करता है, फीवर बराबर रहता है।
फिर जांच नहीं कराएं?
फिर जांच तो गरीब आदमी कहाँ से जाए जांच कराने?
देखिए जांच एक बार करवा लीजिए इसको ना, इसको जांच करवा लीजिए। फिर मतलब कि फीवर फिर दोबारा आ रहा है, इसका मतलब है कि पूरा ठीक नहीं हुआ है। ये सब उजला दाग जो है क्या है? ये सब दाग जो है
बरसाती वही घाव के
नहीं, बरसाती नहीं है। एक बार इसको जाके आप जाके टेस्ट करवाइए इसको, दाग कुछ मतलब दिखाइएगा कि इसको दाग भी है पीछे में,
पैर में बहुत ज्यादा।
काला जार का एक रूप होता है जो कि इसी तरह से डेवलप करता है, समझे? जो इसको एक बार दिखला दीजिए, उसको जाके फिर हॉस्पिटल में कुछ बढ़िया से दिखा दीजिए।
Do you come down with a disease, or does it come down on you? For a treatment that lasts 4 weeks, you will have to sell your land, your house, even your tools. If you go to hospital, someone will need to come with you to feed you, so the children will have to come too. During the 4 weeks of treatment, nobody works. When left untreated, kala-azar is fatal. If you survive, you have nothing left. So how then do you survive? From Bangladesh to Sudan, this neglected disease affects millions of people. 8 out of 10 sufferers are Indians from the Bihar, one of the poorest states in the country. For years, the people who worked on kala-azar worked alone. One of the most eminent specialists in the world, Professor Sundar, only managed to build his clinic thanks to donations from relatives and friends. 1,500 patients are treated here for free every year. For a pathology that kills, that means 1,500 lives saved. While doing his rounds in the villages, Professor Sundar came across a child with kala-azar who needed to be hospitalized. He gave the boy's parents the address of his clinic, taking care to tell them that treatment there is free. They had nothing, not even the money to take the bus, so the professor dug in his pocket and gave them a 50 rupee note. 50 rupees, that's $1. Professor Sundar never saw the child in his clinic. The next time he went to the village, he learned that the boy had died. The parents had used the 50 rupees to buy food.
When I started to work on this disease, it was very difficult to get money for this disease. But certainly the focus of attention has shifted to the neglected diseases, and DNDi, I must say, and MSF has played a great role in it. And people, small individuals like me, have also chipped in a little bit. And so that I think today the future is much more bright for this disease than what was there 20 years ago.
Professor Sundar is working with DNDi and its African and Asian partners to develop a new protocol, just one injection followed by 7 days of pills. This could make it possible to treat the disease out in villages. Perhaps a day will come when the poor won't die in their homes because they don't have $1 to get to the hospital. The initial results are encouraging.
Alors l'idée, la vision que l'on a, c'est d'apporter la meilleure des sciences au service des plus défavorisés. Et on n'a pas l'intention de construire des laboratoires, donc des murs, donc l'idée c'est de mettre ensemble des partenaires privés, publics, qui vont apporter leur contribution dans un but bien sûr non lucratif, afin de découvrir des nouveaux traitements. Et l'objectif il est précis, puisqu'on s'est fixé un enjeu assez ambitieux. On veut amener 6 à 8 nouveaux traitements à ces malades dans une période de 10 ans.
It's supposed to cost $1. Now, if you actually go to the market, the cost is $8 to $9.
As the Earth turns, so we turn with it. Less than 10 years after the Pretoria trial, the horizon has changed. Heads of state have put neglected diseases on their agenda. DNDi has signed hundreds of public and private partnerships. Yesterday's rivals are now working together. On the 40th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper at the New York Academy of Sciences, DNDi has convened its partners. The voiceless now have a voice and are being heard.
As a physician, I treat 100 people, and I know that maybe 5 of them or 20 of them will die, not because of the illness that they've come to see me, but because of the drug I'm giving them. But my conscience tells me I have to give it, because if I don't, then all of them will die. So maybe I give, some will die, some will live. So that's the reality on ground.
We also have the clear ambition to use and strengthen existing capacity in this endemic country. We strongly believe that on the long term, the solution to the problem is to have a strong involvement from partners, research partners in this endemic country.
Over 20 million ASACs have been distributed in Africa, and 50 million are planned for next year. DNDi and its Brazilian partners have developed another anti-malarian treatment that is already saving lives in the Amazon. In just 5 years, 3 new treatments, the fruit of dreams and tireless action, are already out in the field. On the 40th floor of the World Trade Center, in the 3rd tower destroyed by the 9/11 attacks, the only one to have so far been rebuilt, the windows of the Academy of Sciences look down onto the abyss of the old world. A community school, a single class of 98 pupils, 2 desks. The blackboard is covered with equations left by a student of advanced mathematics. The world is more clever and complex than we think. How many people know that Mali is home to a malaria research center that is a world reference in its field? The Malaria Research and Training Center is run by Professor Ogobara Dumbo. He is the grandson of a healer. He took part in launching a ZAC. His teams work at the Bamako Medical Faculty and in a dozen or so villages. The Institut Pasteur, DNDi, the Gates Foundation, and American universities are all working in partnership with the Malian researchers.
Le partenariat impose le partage. Le partenariat impose une relation horizontale. Ça veut dire que l'autre peut faire quelque chose. Et un de mes amis, le professeur Hubert Balik, qui est un médecin de santé publique qui a beaucoup servi cette école, me disait, Hugo, si vous multipliez 1 milliard par 0, ça sera 0. Si vous multipliez 1 milliard par 1, ça sera 1 milliard. Mais si vous dites que votre partenaire peut contribuer, vous multipliez 1 milliard par 2, ça vient 2 milliards. Donc c'est un peu ça le partenariat. Chacun peut apporter une valeur ajoutée.
You can tell a tree by the fruit it bears. After graduating, the young doctors commit to spending years living in the country's poorest area, where the research centers are built. Everyone knows that the North is a magnet for the compass needle and for graduates from the South. Around 30 of the doctors and researchers in Professor Dombo's team had the opportunity to perfect their knowledge in the best universities in the North. Of these 30, how many then went back home? All chose to return to Mali to conduct research on malaria. Not one failed to return. They are currently testing MSP3 with the Institut Pasteur. Over here, people call this vaccine the H-bomb against malaria. In addition to this leading research, the doctors and biologists give free consultations covering all pathologies, which means their research has a real impact on the health of the most underprivileged. I told you the story of little Ashish Lakra, who died of malaria at the age of 4. Now here's the story of Tenejire. She too is 4 and has malaria. Her mother waited a long time before coming. She was afraid of having to explain herself to her husband. She didn't know that Professor Dumbo's centers gave free care. Tenejire's mother had been to see the healer. She had bought a whole list of products at great cost, which she crushed and cooked into a pulp that little Tenejire, already weak from fever, could hardly swallow. And the fever didn't go. The mother arrived in tears at the center, her daughter in her arms. The little girl was already convulsing when the doctor hooked up the IV. 2 hours later, Tenejire was able to drink a sip of water, then a little orange pop. She even ate a bit of cake in the shape of a heart. Her life is no longer in danger.
Allez, bye.